Hello everyone. I wanted to make another video about the miniatures for Grand Cathay that were revealed at Adepticon. This will be less of me gushing about the fashion and the miniatures and more of a study of them as someone who is much more into the painting side of the hobby. I don't want to pretend I have any kind of ultimate authority on how these should be painted. If you have an idea or preference for painting these or anything in general, that is yours, and there is no right or wrong way to go about enjoying painting miniatures. So, I would also invite those watching to comment their own thoughts, advice, and ideas on how you would go about painting these when they hit your painting tables. But I wanted to get my thoughts out as potential ideas and techniques to go about painting these when they release, and hopefully make it a little less daunting for anyone who's unsure about how they want to go about it. So, let's set some things out before we begin. The first being that the colours used for the miniatures are not actually one-to-one with those presented to us in Total War Warhammer 3. For example, some of these leather details on the Jade Warriors in game models appear to be a deep green, while these same parts on the miniatures are the same brown as the leather trim. And Miao Ying has several different colours on her miniature compared to her in-game model. So I have decided I will go over both of these for those who would either like their miniatures to be closer to their preferred version of the Northern Province's colour scheme. The second is that I will be using Games Workshop Citadel paint colours when discussing colours that could be used. I will put up equivalents on screen for those who do not use Citadel paints as well. Finally, this will not be a comprehensive step-by-step painting guide. As much as I would love to be able to give a full painting guide, I obviously don't have access to these miniatures yet. But perhaps in future, I could dabble in one after they're released, and I've had time to try painting them for myself. Let's start off with the Jade units. From the get-go, these miniatures are packed with detail, and quite a few overlapping areas. Between the thin rims and the lamellar armor, there is a lot to unpack. But I think this can be broken down relatively easily. Let's start with the miniatures as presented to us from the reveals. My favourite way to start with painting any miniatures with lots of trim is to start with, well, the trim. And in this case, I would say the leather. Block in the base colour you want for your leather, and then dry brush with your highlight colour over that to catch all the edges. I feel this would save having to do edge highlights, which is often the most time-consuming part of miniature painting. Also, it means you aren't risking catching your highlight on any other details because they aren't even painted yet. After this, if you've scuffed anywhere, you can neaten up with the base colour, and follow up with Agrax Earthshade to add some shadow and tie the base and highlight together. As for the armour, I feel you could actually do this in a similar fashion. Lock in both the lamellar and plates with your metal colour, my choice being Ironhand Steel, and then also do all other metallic parts, even if it's anything that you want to be gold, and the armor trims that are presented as being jade green. After which, you could then start picking out edges with a highlight or a very careful dry brush, depending on whatever you're comfortable with doing. Then some non-oil for a clean dark shade. And then we come to when I mentioned doing the armor trims and gold designs on everything in silver. I think this is where contrast could seriously help as well. A layer of Eldari Emerald over the trims, and Agaros Dunes or Snakebite Leather over the gold details, followed by a lighter gold like Liberator Gold to help add to it. On the other hand, for the Total War Warhammer 3 iteration of this scheme, using the gold scheme I suggested would handily take care of the gold trim on the armor you see in-game. As for the green leather, you could carefully block it in with Eldari Emerald also, letting the previously shaded leather add to the feeling of it being a green coloured leather. Or you could do it more traditionally with a dark jade green like Wah flesh, shade with some Agrax Earthshade for a leathery shade, then highlight. Once you've done all that, I think it would just be a case of blocking in the rest of the details normally, and up to your standard. With the cannons, to me, this is definitely a case of spraying gold, dry brushing with a lighter gold all over, then shading over the dragon decorations with something like Reichland Fleshshade, then Wildwood or even Gorgrunta over the cannon itself. Then blocking the silvers and any other colours of your choice. The crew, on the other hand, I would actually recommend doing the uniform colours first, followed by the trims and the smaller details. This can really vary depending on how you build the crew, as I imagine there will be plenty of bits to choose from to customize them. But, when in doubt, the uniform and clothes are often a good place to start. A nice corn red would make a very good base colour for the northern provinces, and then Macragge blue for the cobalt trim. The underclothes could also be blocked in with some Rakkar flesh, shaded with Agrax and highlighted with some Pallid Witch flesh. If you were to go the route of the Total War Warhammer 3 colour scheme, however, I would substitute the cobalt blue for a dark grey, perhaps Corvus Black highlighted with a slightly lighter dark grey like Eshin Grey or Skaven Blight Dinge. I would also use a more cool white instead of Rakkar from Pallid Witch flesh, like Corex White, shaded with Apothecary White or heavily finned Fang, then highlight with a 1-to-1 mix of Corax White and White Scar. Since there are so few models as well, you could take a little bit of extra time, add a bit of extra highlights like a touch of silver to the dragon designs. This one has sub-assemblies painted all over it. I certainly assume the crew won't be sculpted to the basket, which means you could put them on something temporarily with superglue, paint them up similarly to the cannon crews, and stick them in once you're ready to finish putting everything together. But in there is also the Lord Magistrate. Haha, I didn't forget him this time. Though there isn't too much to say, I feel it would be similar to my suggestion for the cannon crew. Interestingly enough, the colour schemes between the miniature and the Total War Warhammer 3 in-game model actually appears to be just about 1-to-1, save for details like the pattern along the edges of his cape. As for the lantern itself, I believe you could easily start with the metal trims and details first in a similar fashion to how I suggested doing it for the Jade units, on their lever details, and then block in the larger details after. For the actual lantern and the rope, I think I have an idea of how you could tackle that. Block in everything in Rakkar flesh, including the rope, then dry brush on a highlight onto both, being careful of the metals if you did those already. After that, do a thin shade across the bottom of the folds in the lantern, then maybe a second thinner line underneath each of the sharpest edges, and recess shading down either side of the ropes. Then grab yourself a red contrast and carefully paint it over the ropes. For the flags, I think a base, an overbrush with a somewhat lighter colour than your chosen base, and then picking out a couple of highlighted folds here and there will help. After that, it's transfers or any freehand you want to do. As for the Total War Warhammer 3 version, this is a little trickier in terms of the lantern itself. It's a much more fiery orange, showing the Vermilion Warbird inside of the lantern blazing away with fire. Maybe starting with a deep red, working up to something like Chikaro orange, and then bright yellows and white highlights. I feel this could be done with either wet blending or doing overbrushes and dry brushes. Now, for these. The Cathayan Sentinels look like a dry brushing dream. They're all one colour, save for details like the gemstones, and the cloth wrapped around parts of them. This one might just be the easiest to get finished. Spray or block on the colour you want, be it a rich red-brown for terracotta, grey for stone, and jade green for, well, jade. The longest part is going to be things like recess shading, and taking some time picking out the gemstones, straps, and cloth. But if you feel like going a little further, a few highlights on the very edges would really make things pop. For something even more extra, the Total War Warhammer 3 versions are shown to be glowing. My recommendation would be doing something like heavily thinning down a colour of your choice, yellows for terracotta, bright greens and yellows for warpstone for example, then run those into the recesses, and maybe slowly build up colour over thin layers close to the recesses to really help it look like it's glowing with magical energy. Finally, we come to the heroes. The dragon-blooded Shugengun Lord on Great Spirit Longma, the Gatemaster, and Miao Ying, the Storm Dragon. Let's start off with the Gatemaster and work our way up from there, as I feel this one will be quite simple, using the very same method I suggested earlier for the Jade units. Start with the lever trim, and potentially even the straps and belts to get started, followed by blocking in the armour, sword, shield, and anything else metal. After that, it's just a matter of going through the clothing, gear, and decorations. Like before though, we have a difference between the tabletop colours and the Total War Warhammer 3 colours. While the tabletop version is presented with red and black clothing, being the fashion colour of the northern provinces, and having a gold sash, the Total War Warhammer 3 version appears to be the opposite. The clothing is more of a cream colour, which could be built up from something like Morghast bone or Wraith bone, while the cape and sash are both red. The dragon-blooded Shugengun Lord on Great Spirit Longma is certain to be a sub-assembly job, keeping the Shugengun separate from the Great Spirit Longma, then putting them both together after you're finished painting them. While I feel many of my previous suggestions for things like the Jade units and Gatemaster would apply to the Shugengun, the Great Spirit Longma certainly seems like a job for dry brushing. Trust me, I realise that I'm suggesting dry brushing a lot in this video, but I feel for doing all of those scales and details around the Longma's body and wings, dry brushing is definitely going to at least get you started. While I feel you could certainly do a couple of normal dry brushes and achieve a great result, you could also experiment with overbrushing over a blocked-in colour, then going dry brushes of varying pressure to build up the colour and even get a good gradient on the body. The wings I feel will be similar, but if things look a little too bright for your liking on the undersides of the wings, a thin down layer of contrast or shade close to your chosen colour should help knock back the brightness. If you want the colour to be closer to Total War Warhammer 3's version, I would say go for a rich red rather than orange when it comes to the fins and claws on the Longma, and use gold for the mountain scale armour on the Shugengun instead of silver. Also swap out the red for the... I'm not sure what the word would be but the sort of arms of the wings, swap the red out there for greens, or whichever colour you have chosen to do your long red scales. Finally, Miao Ying herself. As before, for the human form, the same things still apply. Get the trims and the armour out of the way first, and then block in the clothing, horns, hair, etc. Then, if you wanted to, you could take your time on the designs, taking it as far as you feel comfortable doing. For the black robes and cape, I feel to get that stormy purple colour, you could do some thin glazes of a rich purple like Luxian Purple Contrast, or Phoenician Purple, followed by highlighting with brighter purples. For a bit more of a lightning-y look, you could do an extreme or spot highlight with some Fenrisian Grey at the very sharpest and top points. For the Total War Warhammer 3 counterpart, keep the gold details as being silver, and go for more cold blacks and greys for the robes. I would also suggest using either Iron Warriors for the scales of her right vambrace, or a dark grey or black contrast over them. The hem of her robe will be more like a crisp light grey like Greyseer, or Corax white if you want to really brighten it up. And the hip armor would be all leather rather than silver. Interestingly enough, she also has some yellow in there for the front of her robes, her sash, and fabric tied around her sleeves. But these fabrics don't actually appear on the miniature, so you could easily ignore it if you wanted. But if you want those in there too, then what you could do is carefully paint a yellow line around the sleeve a quarter of the way up from the end of the sleeve, or even do it along the edge. To finish off, we have her dragon form. What applied to the Longma before could very much apply for Miao Ying's dragon form here, but we could also use my suggestion for Miao Ying's robes and mix it in here once you finish doing the black scales. That is, glazing with some purple, and even doing some dry brushing or highlights of purple. To help the scales and the underbelly stand out from each other, I would suggest non-oil as a shade for the scales, and then something a little warmer like Agrex Earthshade for the underbelly, and even warmer greys like Skaven Black Dinge for a base colour. As before also, for the Total War Warhammer 3 colours, swap all the golds for silver, and even see if you can fit in some purple around anywhere that could be gemstones. I think that just about covers it. Like I said before, this is not a comprehensive step-by-step painting guide. As much as I would love to do one, I have neither the equipment nor the fortune of receiving these miniatures so early from Games Workshop. This is also not gospel. What I have presented here are suggestions to help make painting these very detail-rich miniatures a little easier and accessible for people who are unsure or anxious about where they should start. If you have any of your own suggestions or ideas, please feel free to write them in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please do leave a like and subscribe for more Grand Cathay videos in future. Thank you everyone for watching, and may your day be harmonious.